Hi, you guys. This is Adrienne from Team Gaia. Thank you so much for joining me. I am trying to be super disciplined and get around to talking about the stuff that has informed my life and will also keep all of us feeling buoyant and certain and strong so we can be those Team Gaia ninja warriors that are protecting the planet. And not just protecting it by emanating light, which is awesome, but I think that we're a new generation of Earth protectors, because what we seek to do, I love all of you so much, what we seek to do is to know the truth before we go zapping all kinds of light. And I think that that's probably something that we learned as older souls. We've really been through almost every possible configuration of how to handle beings. That's the fun part about old souls, right? They make that joke, old slow souls are slow learners. So along the spiritual path, we've probably made just about every mistake that it's possible to make. And one of the beautiful messages from that is that friendship is really durable. And, love and romance are all amazing, and especially when they come and they bite you on the butt and you just fall in love. But what we're really falling in love with is the eternal oneness of our own fabulousness together. What we're really falling in love with is life, and life through the lens of sharing time with this other person. So friendship is like love magnified times 10, because it's a lot harder to fall out of. You can include more people in it, and it can go through more realms. You don't have to fulfill a whole bunch of expectations, not to mention the whole childbearing drama that goes along with being God and Goddess in whatever aspects we are. So the thing that's been really on my mind this week is that, for instance, we've got these news stories that are talking about how the banks are just about to collapse, and there's all kinds of things that are like sort of at the structural creaking point of almost collapsing. And I think to myself, you know what, this kind of sense of imminence, that sense that like something's about to give, is something that and we're not sure if it's going to be good or bad. Like the drama is really high around this one. We don't really know why, but these kind of little deadlines keep coming up. And it begs a deeper question that I thought I would sort of examine today, which is, if we're in a world that's like constantly on the threshold and constantly almost in crisis, and is that like an artificial dialectic that like somebody's harvesting the energy off of and making it work for them? I mean, when you know that you have the map inside of where we're going and how to most be yourself, which in the end I think is really the Grail. When you have that map inside, you can choose to participate in those outer pushes to a greater or lesser degree. You can hit the snooze button and let other people handle it this time if you're just too stuck in whatever you're dealing with. Or you can just, I think the healthiest thing is to just kind of put your little coin, like dropping it down the chute, put your little 2 cents worth in terms of like, you can vote with your energy in terms of what you'd like to see in terms of disclosure and resolutions. And I actually think that when we go in with that lighter touch, we're actually coming from like a stronger, more centered place than when we're like, and yet we're all playing some really important roles. So like, let's say you're down in the trenches and you feel like it's you that's being pulled limb from limb and idea from idea and belief from belief. That's an okay place to be too. That's a great place to be. So some people are down in the agitator and they're using each of these cycles as a way to like wash off as much of their crap as possible. And the great part is that we just keep getting truer and truer and truer and more and more and more ourselves. Yay, thank you, Team Gaia Ninja Warriors. So proud of you. I know that if you prioritize truth and you prioritize understanding more than being right, that we're on this great, big, beautiful journey together. And so we can use these little deadlines, these little watersheds as just, you know, reminders that we're all in a process together. But let's take it just a little deeper. So this past couple of weeks, people were sending me so many different kinds of links about evil, the dark side, artificial matrices, demons, archons, you know, parasites. And it can just, that rabbit hole can go deep, deep, deep. And then, of course, like we discussed last week with Kendra Teagan, how the worldly matrix, this control matrix, the Catholic Church, the Illuminati governments, that all of those seem to be using some of those dark side forces too, to be reinforcing their power. This idea that there are child and other sacrifices, that that our energies get dragged and co-opted, and that there's actually behind this somewhat shiny, happy world, there are worlds and worlds of horrors. And you know, there's a reality to that. But when I ask myself, okay, well, what is this really? And I invite you guys to do this too. So when you're getting bombarded by the incredible amount of information about an evil that's very old and very deep and very powerful and very seemingly unstoppable, what I invite you to do as a Gaia Ninja Warrior is to pull yourself back, feel like yourself, and ask yourself, because I give you utter and total permission to not buy into anyone else's story of what's going on this planet. In case you haven't noticed, there's like 60 or 70 different stories. I say, take yourself back, get to your center, look with clear eyes based on who you really are, and go, what is this? What is this trying to say? What is this trying to tell me in the moment? You know, what can I learn from this? Because believe me, there is nothing to be lost in coming back, holding your space, and being curious. Because when you do that, okay, so let's say there's this very ancient evil and there's a very ancient good, and then there's all the players and the permutations and the different soldiers and the kings and the one. Here's where I go. I believe that there is just one energy. There is, in a way, you could say just one self with a capital S. And I know this seems really abstract, but it's the only way I can really come at it. There is one energy, sort of like the sun. You know, it's radiating photons that move in both, what do they say, in paths and particles. So they move as a stream, but they also move as particles. And if we are the photons in that light ray, not to mention the source of that light ray, there is so much room for infinite creation, for infinite good and infinite evil to spin out. And in the end, what it's coming back to is just self-understanding itself. So let's say you're a child and you're born into this world, and then sometimes good things happen and sometimes bad things happen, and you're forming your worldview. Here's how I feel. When we see things about demons, shadow beings, extra-dimensional evil, things that that cause chaos, you know, hidden movers in the world, the place that I go with it, and I'm curious where you go, is that I can't help but feel like these are just fragments of unfinished emotional business. That there's parts of ourselves that get left out of the conversation, that don't get to participate in events, or like, you know, are the victim end of a bad event, and then that energy, that lost will energy, goes off in some other direction and creates a whole nother timeline. And so that's why there seems to be so much information about the dark side and about these other millions of kinds of creepy crawlies that are parasitic. Now that should be a giveaway too, that because they're parasitic, it means that they are unresolved, and that they're sapping your life force. So this idea that there is, on a bigger level, some sort of a world geometric government that is sucking out our life force, kind of like in the Matrix, where we're having a reality, but really we're just in this pod and we're just generating thought activity and feeling activity, and that is the energy that's getting siphoned off to some other realm. I remember when I first encountered that idea, not just in the Matrix, but some spiritual teachers finally started talking about it. I was like, yes, you've got it. There's something there. And I think that that's possible, but if you cook it down even further and you go even further into your self-responsibility, then we can look at them as being unresolved parts of ourselves. Because that's the only place you can hack reality from, right? Is from right here, right now, you being a warrior. That's the only place that reality is hackable. And so basically it takes coming into your heart, coming into a sense of wholeness, going ahead and like creating a buffer zone for all that other information that can just kind of stay right here where you can take it or leave it. And then just ask yourself, what is this information for? What is it trying to tell me? What good is it doing? And is it hackable? So that's how I tend to like to come at life, because otherwise it's just so huge. And I feel like there's a lot of our brothers and sisters and ourselves on certain days when we can really get caught into those negative swirling eddies of worrying about that kind of stuff. I mean, it's one thing to go, oh yeah, so everyone knows that the top echelons of government have been practicing human sacrifice for thousands of years. Like, we know that information intellectually because we've been told it on the internet, and we can also connect some dots. You know, there's works of art that didn't make sense. There's like a lingering energy that didn't make sense. And so when we finally realize, oh, guess what? Somebody's stealing our energy. You know, we're in a state of hypnosis. It's great to have that explanation for once, but you can't really, in my opinion, you can't let that be your stopping point, because then you're just, I mean, okay, you can go through that maelstrom and let it do whatever it's going to do to you, but if it takes you down too far and you lose your structural integrity, then you really get ripped off, and it's going to take months and months and months to get back. So if you'd like to save yourself some of that anguish, you can see it coming, you can look at it, you can feel what it is, but unless you're processing some really deep grief, and even then, it's going to take years and years to like get yourself back to where you feel like you're in charge of yourself. If you let those kind of thoughts in too far, I'm about being brave, so it's fine if that's where you want to go, if that's where you want to process grief and the world's grief, then fine, please do, because I know that you are eternal soul and you will come out the other side. You will, and you will be wiser, and hopefully you won't have lost too much, especially if you do it all in here and here, just from the place of meditation. But when you have to go out in the world and you're still in this maelstrom of like feeling helpless, it's the helplessness part that I feel like is really where the energy gets siphoned off. And it's just basically life forms. So let's say that we're one energy and we're one God force. And some of the God force in us knows that it's God force. And some of the God force in us doesn't know. It's believed the illusion, it's believed the lie, it's believed in separation, and it has some unfinished business having to do with lovability and acceptance. That's where all those dark things just spin off. Basically, it's just one love, one heart, one mind. And then we're also so incredibly creative that anytime we come up with an idea of, well, what about this or what about that, or we want to shift the blame and create, a boogeyman, it all can happen. I have had, let's breathe for a moment here. I have had for a very long time, and I bet you have too, kind of a push-pull relationship within the spiritual community. Between people who are like, let's only stick with positivity. We don't want to talk about politics. We don't want to talk about the dark side. We just don't want to. It's not where we want to be, and it's not the place that we can create from. And then what that looks like to the other people are like that they're running away from important information, that they don't want to face the facts of how incredibly corrupt things really are and how broken things really are. So we've got these two different camps in the spiritual community, the love light people who don't want to re-traumatize themselves with too much truth. And then they also say, hey, but underneath that truth, you're going to see that it's a falsehood. So why go there in the first place? And then the others who are like, yeah, but we've got to really take a look. We've got to put our boots on and like get into this muck and take a look and see where it comes from and see what it is and not deny the facts. I think all of this comes from a primary quote unquote trauma, which is that when we're young and we're believing in the story that the culture tells us, we think everything's fine. You follow a few basic rules like don't hit your brother over the head with his toy and everything's going to be fine. And then around teenagerness, we start to recognize that there are ways in which the world and the adults in our world are not congruent, and that we have some sick or imbalanced systems in place that the adults are still very committed to sustaining. And so then we go through like a sense of betrayal. Like when we find out that, here we are, we're buying some fun clothes, we're going to a nice sale, and then we realize that they were made in sweatshops and by big companies who don't really give a shit, then there's a sense of fundamental betrayal that occurs. And where the warrior really does his or her big work is by going to the very bottom of the real truths and the real facts and looking at them and then finding our way back into hope based on something foundationally true. The way that I decided to deal with it was, besides not shopping anymore, was if I did shop, I would celebrate and give thanks. And this is how I deal with eating meat too, is when I eat meat, I go all the way back to the creature and thank it. So that way I was able to fill my life and my world, even the bad parts or, the distorted parts, with a feeling of love and gratitude. And that would at least get me back into the sweet space, get me back into the heart, because in the end, that's what's going to happen, is that everything that exists or ever has existed or ever will exist on any plane is all part of the heart, and it's all coming back to the heart. So when we're seeing things that are scary or that are stealing energy or that are, actually there to frighten, whether they exist or not, and people have had experiences with them, so clearly they do exist. Everything exists. that it all comes back into love, like asking it, are you loved? Were you loved? Why are you this way? You know, and just bringing it into a sense of understanding. If we understand that the one love, the one heart, the one being actually created each and every one of these distortions, that it then had to go in and live in, i.e. the prison planets, that is, for me, the only place where we are empowered enough to actually change the matrix. So when we aren't aware that we are part of the creative force, we just feel like we're a victim. We're walking. It's like if you were, you're going to laugh. If you were in high school and you worked on like a haunted house project, right? And you created the really scary haunted house and you knew all the backstory of how it worked and you knew who was working it and what they were dressed up as. If you tried to go through, you with that much knowledge, you would be going through it sort of like as a reviewer, going, okay, did all the gags work? But the only way you could really go through the ride would be if you had lost your memory of it, and then you would be actually genuinely horrified at all the great work you did creating a scary environment. I think that from the most proactive and most empowered place, you could really see it that way. It doesn't mean that there aren't causes and effects and different agents and wars. But the only place that I have found to resolve all those wars and keep it moving in the direction we want to see is to take as much ownership as possible from my side of whatever conflict is playing out in front of us. And that's sort of another aspect of the prison planet idea, is that this sense of hell can go on and on and on and build on itself, and it has lots of history and it has lots of players, and you can see throughout Earth history where they came to blows again. Basically, eternity is eternal in every single direction. Infinity is infinite in every single direction. And the kind of cool part is that you really can switch tracks. You are free as being to explore any of those tracks. If you want to explore crime and gangster life, if you want to explore fringe sexuality, if you want to explore new frontiers in economy and how to live, all of those timelines exist and they all go on eternally. That's why we have such creative power and so much free will, is that we get to choose which of these tracks we will explore. And Real Gaia Ninja Warriors we want to heal the whole thing. We really do. We want to heal all those broken fragments and jagged edges and places where love didn't get in. And that's what makes you guys so special. But there are also a lot of pitfalls to that. I know a lot of women especially feel very emotionally and physically tied into the planet's struggle. A lot of this comes around the menstrual cycle, where we feel just really besieged and we can feel all the planetary pain. And then because it's a level, we know that there's some level of earth healing in there. We actually can take like a little bit of pride in the fact that we feel all the earth's pain, because it means we're tied into something bigger and a bigger job. But oh my God, you really don't want to stay there. You don't want to live there forever. I strongly and heartily encourage you to pull back into true knowing and just know you are already helping. You are already part of the oneness. You are already helping the planet move forward just by being awake and working with your heart and looking with as clear and truthful eyes as you possibly can. So what happens with a signal, okay, like a tone. Let's say there's a signal or a tone that's being sent out. When it has a higher frequency, it has more stability. It has, the oscillation is much, much finer. And when we came down into physical, we allowed some of that oscillation to become much more dense or much more slow. And that's where the bottom can start falling out of some of those highs and lows. So that's why it's so important to go ahead and allow yourself to have the highest frequency that feels good for you, because that's when your energy is running straight and true and no distortions. It's only us and our doubts and fears and wonderings and curiosities, explorations, that allow the distortion and the that bottom falling out, that ends up getting parasited and feeding like an alternate power system that isn't really what we wanted or intended. But the good part is that if you really stop and you look at that alternate power system, you can face anything. You can look it in the eye and move it through your body complex and come to peace with it. And you can wrestle that until you actually genuinely come to a real peace based on truth. And I feel like that's kind of the big work that we have to do. But here's where the dark side comes in again. What if all of that, although it teaches us a lot about ourselves and a lot about compassion, and there's a lot to recommend about it, what if all of that was just set up as a great big hologram? As why is it that when we look out into the world and look for our signs and our symbols, that we receive them? Do we just live in a hologram? And if we are in a hologram, is it a hologram that's designed to take our taxes, take our energies, make us go on a treadmill, and is basically like energizing some sort of alternate dimension? That is what the false lighters, I would call them, seem to believe. And I can't completely deny it, because as a science fiction writer, I'm like, hey, that could totally be. But coming back to truth and autonomy, the exciting part is that because you are here, because you're capable of independent thought, because you are a sovereign generator of your own reality and how to perceive it. Okay, so let's say that the great God matrix, just like, it's like this motor, and all it's doing is very impartially being itself, and it's just spinning out photons and energy. We, as sovereign beings, become assemblage points of our realities, and we get to decide what things mean. And we tend to find some friends, especially if you want to prosper and be happy. You'll find friends who also agree with certain very core parts. And that can be dysfunctional too, right? Because if your identity is built around being a victim, then you'll have that reflected to you in your friends. They'll also feel like victims. And we can help each other dig out of that. Or sometimes you'd have to walk away and go, I can't define myself that way anymore. I need to move into something that's more energizing for me. The fascinating and beautiful part about it is that everybody is doing exactly what they need to do to feel complete in this moment. And everybody has something to teach, and everybody has something to learn. But those of us who wish to be truly awesome Gaia Ninja warriors are always going to be seeking the truth inside the truth inside the truth. And there's no place that we will fear to look, and yet we'll also use a lot of self-compassion, so that when we find ourselves fearing to look somewhere, we'll simply make a note and turn away and know that we can come back to that. So that's, for me, the bottom line of true accountability, is that you can be kind enough to yourself that you can back off a problem and wait and hold your space and see it for what it truly is. Instead of jumping into, because we all go through that warrior phase of like wanting to fight every single windmill, every single dragon, real or imagined, that comes our way. And that's a time that's very special too. But you can end up, you know, hacking and slashing it like your very best friends. and, you know, parts of ourselves just go flying everywhere. And it's, you know, it's another awesome part of being a warrior is, you know, that you go through that phase too. And you might piss everybody off who knows you. And then you have to go off into the wilderness alone for a while, whatever. Okay. So I wanted to bring that idea to you that, that we go through like an enchantment and a disenchantment and then a re-enchantment, that we are, you know, that we feel really betrayed when we find out that the story that our society told us isn't really true. Because I feel like that's something that we keep coming back to. The elections, for instance, is something that we're currently going through with that. We're taking it all as this great big adventure, hopefully. Some people are freaking out. But the truth of the matter is, for me anyway, that it's the ideas that are coming in that are informing the debate that we're all having to wrestle with, and that we're having to break through our enemy images of each other in order to actually communicate, in order to find real solutions, in order to exchange the data that we have so that we can be really centered, grounded, and embodying exactly where we're really going to go. So in terms of the American political game, yeah, there's this huge probability that the systems that we've participated in are going to try to screw us over once again. And if you are a fan of Bernie or even a fan of Trump, that you almost need to understand that both of those people are really signs that something good is happening. Both of them are what they call dark horses. They are memesters from the far, far fringes who are bringing in brand new ways of looking things and brand new information. And for me, the good part is that the center, that corrupt core that everything keeps getting pulled back into when we pay our taxes and when we vote and when we participate, all of that stuff's getting called into question on both sides. So this is a really, really alive time. And I really suggest that you just get in touch with your real true core values and try and carry this lightly. I'm so happy for the young people who are making lots of phone calls, or for the people who are networking and learning more about each other, and for the people who are trying to communicate on both sides of the aisle, because all of that is really alive. But in the end, we're going to either see, it's so exciting because if they try and screw people over on this, then we're all awake. We are all super duper awake and aware and excited and like participating. But I also don't want you to like get completely devastated if your person doesn't win. I want you to understand we're kind of in this for the long haul. And this is all just a great big meme experiment. And I'm excited to see how far we can take it. But in the end, it's still going to be the way that you face your fellow human being. And how much did you learn? And how much do you care? Because you have 1,000 points of free will throughout each and every day, if only you know it. You can create any life you want for yourself. You just have to have the bravery to take the steps that are necessary and create that life. Each and every one of us has that ability. We really, really, really do. Okay, so that's really what I just wanted to really show you guys, share with you guys, is that you really do have the power within to take on any of the dark forces. And yes, sometimes it's good to have the name of a higher being, because we don't always have access to all of our whole essence. You know, or we could be in the middle of issues and sorting things out on our subconscious, and so we just don't feel like we have access to everything. So when you call on Jesus, or you call on Archangel Michael, or you call on Kuan Yin, or you call on Lao Tzu, or whoever works for you to remind you of your truest, highest abilities, basically. Calling on that higher help, calling in those higher frequencies, absolutely helpful. And oh yeah, Archangel Gabriel, he's really good at dispelling clouds. Who do you like? I'm very curious. You should put your comments below. Anyway, if you love what we're doing here, if you love the conversation around taking back your full spectrum being and knowing that that is how we're creating the world that we're going to have, that we're going to want to live in, my project is called Team Gaia. You can find us on Facebook. We have both a fan page and a conversation group. Not to mention you can leave comments here. If you want to get updates and learn more about the ideas behind Team Gaia and how they got there, go ahead and you can click and send me your email and I'll send you updates. I think that's all that we have right now. Okay, wait. There's always something more, isn't there? This idea that you can trust yourself is really, really revolutionary. And it's fraught with pitfalls, except when you're coming from your true essence heart. In other words, yeah, there's ego. There's something called hubris, which is where you have the kind of pride that leads to a fall, as they say. This idea that there is deception, that there are actually beings that strive to deceive, or the idea that the earth is a hologram created by artificial or false light, non-heart light. All of these things really, really do have their own timelines, and they do have their own reality, and I don't want to dismiss that. All I know is that when it comes to the end of the day, what I want for you and what I want for me is to sit in the truth of true being. And that is not necessarily a true being that a guru can tell you or give you. They're good for setting an example. You should never hold a guru as having more knowledge than you do, or being a different kind of person than you, or a different kind of being. You really can trust yourself. You don't know everything. Yeah, you're not always right. Sure. But when you're coming from the true center of your own inner knowing, I really feel that the strongest choice in this realm is to trust yourself. That all that other parasitic stuff happens when we're not trusting ourselves, when we're succumbing to doubt, when we're looking around for information. That's when I think we have the fallout in our frequencies, is when we're actually in doubt. And I know it's a rocky road. I know that we've done incredibly stupid things. You know, people have massacred each other in the name of uncertainty. So I know that it's not a total open road, but I feel that at a certain frequency, at a certain dimensional openness and understanding, after you've cleaned all that stuff off of you, you really can trust yourself at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be that complicated. So the first time I heard this term prison planet, it came as a shock to me, because I had secretly felt on a dream level that that's kind of what I came in here for. So in one of my other dimensional memories, I remembered me and about 5 or 6 other angelic type beings responding to Earth's cry of needing help, and sneaking in here like little parachuters in the middle of the night. And the energetic view of this planet was phenomenally strange. Basically, what we were coming into was nothing like what the planet Earth looks from space. It actually had like steel plates that could slide apart and together, and like layers of sort of like barbed wire, or fencing. In order for us to get into this prison planet to do a massive jailbreak, it was it took a lot of courage and it took a lot of stealth. And I'm really glad that we did it, because apparently what was going on in here, in some evil little experiment perhaps, was really not good, you know, and it was destabilizing the rest of the galaxy, because that bottom level of the amplitude had lost its structural integrity. When the mass sum of grief and suffering is just too overwhelming, it destabilizes the entire universe. And that is what the earth was in. It was like total grief and pain. And as a young girl, I really felt that it was important that everyone become vegans, because that level of grief and pain was also being pushed off onto the animals, that we were all participating in the grief and pain of animals by eating meat. I feel a little differently about that now, but I still think it's a pretty valid worldview. And if you can manage to be vegan, great. But I actually have a much deeper worldview about it now, which is that I went into the experience of the feedlot animal, and I found what part of the heart, what part of existence that was. And it wasn't the fact that we were going to be eaten that was the bad part. It was the fact that we were going to be heartlessly consumed with no benefit, no appreciation, no loving intent. That was the bad part. So for me, it's much stronger shamanic medicine to go and be with that animal and give it love and reinforce the matrix of love and the exchange of love that's all over the planet, that when we are in that flow, all of those little archons and ankle biters and sorrow and grief and regrets and doubts, all of those animated lost will, all come back into oneness. So I knew that as long as I was willing to be that animal next time, that I was going to be okay with eating meat. But you have to really be willing to give thanks on the deepest level possible, and be willing to go to bat and be that animal next time. And so if you are within the vibrational matrix that we are busy building of unconditional, unbreakable, unshakable love from every direction, that is the transformed world. And that is the place we're going to. And that is the flower breaking through the concrete, or the chick breaking through the shell. That's why we're here, and that's what we're doing. And yeah, it might have been intended as a terrible experiment, that God was lured down into God's own creation and then locked in by a part of God that was jealous and disenfranchised from its own self, i.e. Satan/Lucifer. You know, feeling left out and feeling neglected, and we were locked into a jail of our own making, of our own minds, and now we're having to find something bigger, deeper, and truer that will give us the to push out. And that's what we're doing, and we're really, really doing it. I want to thank you guys so much for everyone who's been writing to me, everyone who's holding that flame, everyone who's holding the true love light of who you really are. It's been incredible. We're going to have so much fun, and I just send you my congratulations and my deepest respect and my thanks. All right. Namaste.